Ever feel like you're standing at the edge of a vast forest with a map that's full of blank spaces?
Ah, yeah, I know that feeling. Especially when you're starting a research paper.
Totally. It can be super overwhelming. But I guess that's where a literature review comes in, right? To help us fill in those blank spaces.
Exactly. It's like building a house. You wouldn't just start throwing up walls without a solid foundation, would you?
I guess not. So the literature review is like the foundation of our research paper.
You got it. It helps us understand what's already out there, all the work that's been done before.
So it's not just about summarizing a bunch of old research papers.
No, it's much more than that. It's about, well, think of it like this. It's about becoming an expert in your topic, at least for a little while.
Become an expert. Sounds a bit daunting, but I guess it makes sense.
It is a bit of a deep dive for sure, but it's the best way to figure out where your research fits in, to see what's already been explored, the different approaches people have taken, and most importantly, where the gaps are.
So we're looking for those missing pieces of the puzzle, the questions that haven't been answered yet.
Exactly. And a solid literature review helps you answer some big questions right up front. Why is this topic even important? What don't we know yet? And how will your research add something new to the conversation?
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's about setting the stage, showing that our research is building on what's come before, but also pushing the boundaries a bit further.
Right. So where do we even begin with this whole literature review thing?
Well, I imagine it involves hitting the books, or I guess the digital equivalent these
You're
days.
on the right track. We're talking about diving deep into those academic databases.
Mm.
JSTOR, PubMed, Google Scholar, you name it.
So just type in some keywords and grab the first 10 results.
Mm,
That should do it right.
hold on there. Not so fast. It's not just about quantity, it's about quality too. Think of it like being a detective searching for clues. You need to be a little more strategic.
Oh, okay, so we need to be a little more specific with our search. Like, what are we actually looking for? Just articles?
Articles are a good starting point for sure, but don't limit yourself. Look for books, conference papers, even dissertations. Anything that's relevant to your research question.
Got it. Search smart, not just hard. But once we've gathered all these sources, what do we actually do with them?
This is where things get really interesting. It's not enough to just summarize what you read. You need to think critically about the research. Evaluate its strengths and weaknesses. Think about its limitations.
So we're playing research detective, looking for both the good and the bad.
Precisely. Ask yourself, what did the authors do well? Where did they fall short? Did they miss any important variables? Could their conclusions be interpreted differently?
I see what you mean. It's about looking beyond the surface and digging a little deeper. But how does this all relate to our own research question?
That's the key. As you're critically evaluating each study, think about how it connects to your own research. How does it support or challenge your ideas? Does it highlight any gaps that your research could fill?
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. We're building a case for our own research, showing that we've done our homework, and that our work is going to add something new to the conversation. But how do we actually go about connecting the dots between all these different studies?
That's where synthesis comes in. It's about finding the patterns, the common threads that run through the research. And more importantly, it's about identifying where the gaps lie.
So we're piecing together a puzzle, and those gaps are the missing pieces that our research can fill.
You got it. And sometimes those gaps aren't immediately obvious. You might need to think outside the box, consider different perspectives, or even challenge the assumptions of previous research.
Wow, this is starting to sound pretty intense. I'm feeling a mix of excitement and a little bit of, well, apprehension, I guess.
It can be a challenge for sure, but that's what makes it so rewarding. This process of critical analysis and synthesis is what leads to those truly unique research questions, the ones that can make a real impact.
All right, I'm definitely starting to feel the excitement building, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to make sure we understand this critical analysis part. What are some specific questions we should be asking ourselves as we read through those research papers?
Great question. Let's say you're researching the impact of social media on mental health. It's a pretty hot topic these days. And you come across a study that claims that using social media leads to higher levels of anxiety. Sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention, but I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
You bet. As you're critically evaluating that study, think about the specifics. Who were the participants in the study? Were they all teenagers, for example? Or all from the same background? And what about other factors that could be influencing their anxiety levels? Things like pre-existing mental health conditions, family dynamics, or even just the amount of time they spend online. Did the researchers consider all those variables?
Ah, I see what you mean. It's about looking at the bigger picture and not just taking things at face value.
Exactly. Research is rarely black and white. It's full of nuances and complexities. Your job is to unravel those complexities and really dig into the details.
So it's like being a detective, but also a bit of a philosopher, questioning everything and looking for deeper meaning.
I like that, and that's exactly the mindset you need for a literature review. Be curious, be critical, and always be open to new perspectives.
This has been super insightful. We've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much to explore. So how do we go from this critical analysis to actually writing the literature review itself?
Well, that's where we'll pick up next time. We'll delve into the art of crafting a compelling narrative, organizing your thoughts, and making sure your writing shines.
I can't wait. Stay tuned for part 2 of our journey into the world of literature reviews. We'll be back with more tips and insights to help you master this essential research skill.
Welcome back. So last time, we talked about those crucial first steps in the literature review process. Diving deep into all those research databases, critically analyzing the studies we find. It's like, piecing together this complex puzzle, each study offering a unique clue.
Yeah, and it's like we're building a case for our own research.
Yeah.
We're showing we've done our homework and that our work is actually going to add something new to the conversation.
Exactly. But the question is, how do we present all this information in a way that's clear, engaging, and most importantly, convincing? That's where the art of crafting a compelling narrative comes in.
Because, just dumping a bunch of summaries onto a page,
Yeah.
that's not going to win anyone over.
You got it. Nobody wants to wade through a sea of disjointed information. Think of your literature review as a story you're telling the reader. You're guiding them through the existing research, highlighting the key findings, and building up to the gaps that your research is going to address.
Okay, I like that analogy, a story. But every good story needs structure, right? So how do we organize all this information without, overwhelming the reader?
There are a few different approaches you can take. One common structure is chronological. You start with the earliest research and work your way forward, showing how the field has evolved over time.
So, like, if I was researching the history of artificial intelligence, I might start with the earliest theories and kind of trace the development of AI through the decades.
Exactly. That's a great example. This approach is particularly helpful when you're dealing with a topic that has, a clear historical progression. It allows you to highlight those key milestones and shifts in thinking over time.
Makes sense. But what if chronology isn't that important for my topic? Are there other ways to structure the story?
Absolutely. Another common structure is thematic. Instead of following a timeline, you group studies together based on their shared themes or concepts.
So let's say my research is about the impact of climate change on coastal communities. I might have themes like sea level rise, economic impacts, or migration patterns, something like that.
You got it. Thematic structure lets you delve into these specific aspects of your topic and show how those different studies connect and build upon each other. It's like weaving together a tapestry of knowledge, highlighting the intricate patterns and connections.
I'm starting to see how the right structure can make such a difference. It's not just about presenting the information, but about crafting a narrative that actually guides the reader toward a deeper understanding.
Precisely. And don't forget about another important element, the methodological structure. Now, this approach focuses on grouping studies based on the research methods they used.
Okay, so like if I'm comparing the effectiveness of different therapies for treating depression, I might group studies together based on whether they used cognitive behavioral therapy, medication, or maybe a combination of both.
Exactly. Methodological structure is particularly useful when you're evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of different research methods, or maybe highlighting methodological gaps in the existing literature.
Got it. So we've got chronological, thematic, and methodological structures. How do we choose? How do we know which one is the best fit for our research?
It really depends on the nature of your research question, and the story you're trying to tell. Sometimes even a combination of structures might be the most effective approach.
So it's about being flexible and finding what works best for our specific research.
You nailed it. It's all about showcasing the research and creating that compelling narrative we talked about. Now, once you've got your structure figured out, it's time to roll up your sleeves and start writing. But even with a solid structure, the writing itself can feel pretty daunting.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Staring at that blank page can be a bit intimidating. Any tips on how to make the writing process a little less painful?
One helpful tip is to start with an outline. Break your literature review down into sections, each with a clear heading that kind of summarizes the main point.
So like creating a roadmap for the reader.
Yeah.
So they know where we're going.
Exactly. An outline helps you stay organized, it ensures that logical flow of ideas, and honestly, it just makes the writing process much more manageable. And when you start writing each section, remember to use those strong topic sentences. Sentences that clearly signal the main idea of each paragraph.
Okay, so each paragraph should have a clear focus. And all those paragraphs should be working together to build that overall narrative we've been talking about.
Precisely. And within each paragraph, you'll want to use those transition words and phrases to connect your ideas and create a smooth, engaging flow. Think of those transitions as like bridges. They guide your reader from one point to the next.
You mean words like, however, furthermore, on the other hand, things like that.
You got it. Those little words can make a huge difference in the readability and clarity of your writing.
This is super helpful. But what about the tone and style of our writing? Is there like a specific voice we should be using for a literature review?
You want to strike that balance between being informative, providing all the necessary details, but also keeping it engaging for the reader. Remember, it's an academic paper, so maintaining a formal and objective tone is key.
So no emojis or internet slang. Probably best to leave that stuff for social media, right?
Haha, probably a good idea. But formal doesn't have to mean boring, right? Use strong verbs, active voice, and vivid language to keep your reader hooked.
So instead of saying the study was conducted by the researchers, we could say something like the researchers investigated.
Exactly. It's more concise, more dynamic. And don't be afraid to use illustrative examples from the research to bring your points to life.
Because sometimes a real-world example can really help to drive the point home.
You got it. Examples make those complex concepts more relatable and memorable for the reader. Plus, it shows that you really understand the research you're citing.
This is incredibly helpful. But before we move on, I have to ask, what about citations? They seem like a pretty big deal, right?
Absolutely. Citations are crucial. They give credit to the original authors, demonstrate the breadth of your research, and allow the reader to easily find those sources you've used.
Okay, so we definitely need citations. But there are so many different citation styles out there. How do we know which one to use?
That's a great question. It usually depends on your field of study or the specific guidelines you're given. Whether it's APA, MLA, Chicago, or another style, consistency is key. Make sure you're following the rules carefully. And don't be afraid to use a citation manager if it helps you stay organized.
It sounds like citations are more than just a formality. They're an integral part of the academic process. They help to build a web of knowledge, connecting researchers across time and disciplines.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about building upon the work of those who came before us. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on the writing process itself, structure, clarity, those all-important citations. Is there anything else we should keep in mind? One thing I always emphasize is staying focused. Remember, your literature review should have a clear purpose, and it should connect back to your research question. Don't get sidetracked by interesting tangents or go down rabbit holes that aren't relevant to your main argument.
So it's about staying on track and making sure that every piece of information we include is actually contributing to that overall narrative.
Exactly. Think of your literature review as a carefully curated exhibit. You want to showcase the most relevant and compelling pieces of research to build your case and support your research goals.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I have a much better grasp on this whole writing process now. But there's one crucial step that we haven't talked about yet: revision and editing.
You're right. And that's exactly where we'll pick up next time. We'll explore those strategies for refining your writing, polishing your prose, and ensuring your literature review is clear, concise, and ready to impress.
Stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive into the world of literature reviews. We'll be back soon with more tips and tricks to help you master this essential research skill.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been on quite a journey, haven't we? From diving headfirst into those research databases to really getting into the nitty-gritty of writing, crafting that compelling narrative.
Yeah. We've covered so much ground already, talking about strong topic sentences, smooth transitions, all those little things that make a big difference. Oh, and of course, those all-important citations.
Absolutely. Citations are key. But before we wrap things up completely, I think there's one last crucial step we need to tackle: revision, editing, polishing our work until it shines.
You're right. It's so tempting to hit that submit button as soon as we're done writing, but that's just the beginning, right? So true. It's easy to feel like we're done, but there's always room for improvement.
Think of it this way. It's like sculpting, you know? You start with a rough block of marble, and then you carefully chip away at it, refine it, polish it, until you reveal that masterpiece hidden inside.
I love that analogy. But okay, how do we actually sculpt our writing? Where do we even begin?
Honestly, the first step is the simplest one. Take a break. Seriously, step away from your computer. Go for a walk, grab a coffee, anything to give yourself some distance from the text.
So resist that urge to hit submit right away. Let it sit for a bit.
Exactly. Let your writing simmer for a day or two, then come back to it with fresh eyes. You'll be amazed at what you catch when you're not so close to it.
Oh, for sure. Sometimes I read my own work and think, did I actually write this? It's like seeing it for the first time. But what exactly should we be looking for when we revisit our writing?
Good question. Ask yourself some key questions. Is my argument clear and well supported? Have I provided enough evidence for all my claims? Is my writing concise and engaging? Does it flow smoothly from one point to the next?
Those are some really good questions to keep in mind. But sometimes it's hard to be objective about our own work.
Yeah.
Like what if we're just too close to it to see the flaws?
I totally get it. It's easy to get tunnel vision when you've been staring at the same document for hours. That's why feedback is so valuable.
Okay. So get a second opinion.
Exactly. Share your work with a trusted colleague, a mentor, maybe even a writing center. A fresh perspective can help you catch those things you might have missed, those hidden typos, awkward sentences, or even gaps in your logic.
So it's like having an extra set of eyes to spot those little things that we might not notice ourselves.
Precisely. And remember, feedback is a gift, not a criticism. Embrace those suggestions. Use them as an opportunity to learn and grow as a writer.
That's such an important point. It's easy to get defensive about our work, but feedback can really help us to create a stronger final product.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to revise multiple times. Good writing is a process. It takes time and effort to craft a literature review that's truly clear, concise, and compelling.
This has been an incredible journey. We've covered so much ground, from the purpose of a literature review to the nitty-gritty of writing and revising. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they embark on their own research adventures?
Remember, a well-crafted literature review is more than just a summary of past research. It's a critical evaluation. It's a synthesis of knowledge. And it's a launchpad for your own unique contributions to the field. So embrace the challenge, dive deep, ask those tough questions, and don't be afraid to make your mark on the world.
That's a great way to end our deep dive into the world of literature reviews. We hope you found these tips and insights helpful as you start your own research journey. Remember, a strong literature review is the foundation for impactful research. So put in the time and effort and make yours shine. Happy writing, everyone.